Our guest today is dedicated to helping children, teens, and caregivers navigate life's heaviest moments. Jessica Correnti is the founder of Kids Grief Support. She is a certified child life specialist who has worked everywhere from pediatric ICUs to emergency rooms. And she's also a published author, but her mission became even more personal after her own family experienced a profound loss. Today, Jessica is an advocate, a support group leader, a published author, as I said, of ABCs of Grief book series, as well as Forever Connected, which is a book for bereaved siblings. Jessica, welcome to the Dying to Know More podcast. It's so nice to have you.
It's so good to be here. I'm excited to chat.
Awesome. Okay, so you've been a certified child life specialist for around 18 years, and you help families and children navigate grief and loss. What initially led you to this work?
Oh gosh. So there could be a long-winded answer or a relatively brief answer. I'll try to be as brief as possible with this. But really, I actually started out in college as a nursing major and was super torn between nursing and education.
Okay.
And I had a professor that brought me in and told me, you know, there's something that's kind of combining those two professions right there, and told me about child life and what this profession was really all about. And the light bulb went off, and I really was excited, inspired. I knew right then and there that this was the profession for me, to be able to be in those medical situations and in a way kind of have this teacher role of helping the kids to understand what is going on with, you know, why they or their family member is in the hospital, helping them cope with the stress and anxiety that is coming up for them, helping it make sense, and really just teaching them skills and tools to get through these really tough events. So that's really the background of how I got into the field of child life. And then as my life has progressed and different grief situations have come up in my own life, it has really sparked a fire to create impact and change in places where I saw these really big gaps coming up.
Okay, so you sort of you just I'm guessing gave us kind of an understanding of what your work entails. How does this differ, or what differentiates this from that of like a therapist?
Yeah. So a child life specialist is focusing much more on the medical aspect of helping a child understand what is happening.
Okay.
So a big piece of our job is to figure out, what does a child know? What are their misconceptions? How can we help them understand what is happening in a way that they can understand developmentally? And a lot of that's through play. So play is a child life specialist's main tool to help children understand and process what they're going through, and give them a voice, because that's how children process their experiences. It's through play.
So what's an example of like a playful scenario in which you'd be navigating a heavy topic?
Okay, so I'll give a really simple example of I had a preschool age child who was very, very confused about why his baby sibling died. And in order to help this 4-year-old child understand the placental abruption, we used a little toy baby doll, some Play-Doh, and a clear container. So I had the clear container be the womb right there. We made a umbilical cord and a placenta with the Play-Doh, attached it to this little baby doll, and we talked about what it means to have the placental break away, placenta break away from the womb there, and we talked about what happens. So using these play and visuals, and there's different types of play. Some is more directed by the child life specialist. Some is more directed by the child if they're trying to process something. So there's lots of different types of play that we could be doing, but that's one example of utilizing toys and play to help a child understand what's happening, because something like that is so abstract for a preschooler to understand, but once
Yeah.
they see it and can manipulate with their hands,
Okay.
it all clicks. It's
Yeah.
so that's one example, and everything that we're doing is going to be very catered towards that specific child and family and situation. So there's definitely not a one size fits all of
Right.
what we're doing in any given situation or day. Every day is so different in our work.
So do you have to have, I know you said you started out in nursing. Do you have to have or it sounds like you do have some sort of like medical training or experience. Did you get your nursing degree, or how are you
I did
getting,
not get my nursing degree. So to
like, how do
become a
you
child
know
life
how to, like, you
specialist,
just
yeah.
explain something that most people may not know what it is, or how it
Hmm.
works. So how are you,
Yeah,
how do you get that info?
sure. So to be a child life specialist, you have to have a core background. There's a certain criteria for different classes that you have to take in
Okay.
college. So
Okay.
there's specific class coursework, but then after that you have to do a an internship that's 600 hours, 680, something like that.
A
A
lot of
pretty
hours.
extensive
Yeah.
internship. Yeah, it's changed a little bit since I was a child life intern, so I don't know if I have those numbers 100% right since it's been a little while, but you have to do an internship, you have to sit for an exam, so it's a pretty extensive process. And I would say most child life specialists, they're really learning that medical knowledge and information during their internship.
Okay.
And just being in the medical setting, you're always learning new things. The
Gotcha.
thing that a child life specialist has that they really use to their advantage is they can take some very complex medical information and they know how to synthesize that and break
Okay.
it down into very simple language that children can understand. So really, I mean, I'm learning new medical diagnoses all the time, even at this
Really?
point, almost 2 decades
Be
into the
like
field.
invigorating, kind of
It
like you're
is.
always
Yeah.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are new things all the time where I'm like, I've never heard of that diagnosis. Let me look that up. Let me see how I can break this up into, um, information that a child can understand. I actually have a session later today with a child whose sibling died. And um, the way that I'm going to help explain it to them is really utilizing some graphics on, it's a virtual session, so we're going to use some graphics on Canva and essentially create a photo book with these graphics to help this child understand why their sibling died. And it's a diagnosis that I had to look up, so I
Yeah.
don't know all of the medical background.
Right.
It's just I have to do my own research first
Yeah.
and break it down into a way that I can understand it and then take that information and help a child understand it. And often it
Yeah.
is through things that they can understand. So if it's something related to, I don't know, let's say it's something related to an infection, and we can talk about the different components of like the body's response. And maybe we're talking about white blood cells are like the superhero fighters that are trying to do everything they can to attack the
Hmm.
virus that has invaded the body's system. So utilizing what a child already is interested in and knows and taking it to their level is really what a child life specialist expertise really that's the foundation, is
Okay.
making it relatable to children.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
sounds equal parts creative and exciting, and also kind of challenge, like super
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would think, yeah.
Yeah. That's why I think child life specialists are naturally um, really good children's book authors, because we can
Yeah.
take really difficult topics and make it a little bit
Distill them
easier
down.
to understand. And
Yeah.
you, anybody who has seen my books in the ABCs of Grief series can probably see that in the writing. My writing is very simple.
Yeah.
But I'm taking an incredibly nuanced, layered, complex topic
Right.
and making it very easy to digest sentences and pieces that just
Right.
click for kids.
Right.
And that's what a child life specialist does, is we take the really difficult, layered, confusing things and we make it a little bit easier to understand.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's kind of get down to it then. So what are some common ways, like what are some signs or symptoms that a child is struggling with grief, and how different is it from an adult's
Yeah.
grief?
Yeah. Kids definitely do grieve differently.
Yeah.
Uh, so kids grieve in a different way. They are more piecemeal about processing their grief. So for an adult, it's very much all consuming. You feel the weight of it all at once. You're totally ripped open. A child cannot necessarily process in that way, and they go really heavy into their grief for sometimes it's moments at a time, and then they hop back out of it. Some people will refer to this as like kids are like puddle jumpers. They're in it
Yeah.
and then they're out of it. So they might ask these really big, deep, heavy questions, or they might be sitting there sobbing about missing their person who died, and then a minute later, they're asking if you can go play a game with them. What's for dinner? I want to go, something that is like a total 180 from where they just were. And their brain can only process grief for a short period of time, and then they hop right out of it. So as time goes on, as they get older and go into different developmental phases, they process it again at a different layer and level of that age and developmental stage. So it's a longer process typically than an adult. And everybody is grieving in their own timeline and their own space, and there's certainly pieces of your grief that is forever. It's embedded into who you are, and that's regardless of what age, whether you're a child or an adult. But kids are definitely a little bit different with that. Some of the more so red flags that I see, that I often will recommend, hey, I think your child needs a little bit more support, would be things like they're having a really difficult time sleeping or eating. They're not interested in the activities that they once were interested in, and it's just really hard for them to find joy in anything anymore. Really high just worries or confusion about what happened. So a lot of repetitive questions about what happened, why things happened. So any major shift in behavior would be a big one too, because often kids are getting their grief out in very behavioral ways. So they might be having a whole bunch of meltdowns or temper tantrums, or for the older kids, maybe they're just totally shutting down or engaging in risky types of behaviors or experiences. So just keep an eye on what you see from them, both from a verbal and a nonverbal type of way. And if there are, obviously there are going to be changes, but if there are changes that are impacting the day-to-day life, then it would be wise to have some sort of grief support.
Okay. And so if a parent or a caregiver spots some of these red flags, as you call them, what's the next move? What is calling a pediatrician or what?
I think it depends. I don't think there's any one size fits all, because we all grieve in different ways. What I like to have people do is try a whole bunch of different ways of coping with the grief, processing the grief. So for some people, it might be finding a one-on-one specialist who does specialize in grief. So it could be somebody like myself, a child life specialist who specializes in grief. It could be a play therapist. It could be, really anybody. Just do your research behind what their credentials are, and make sure that they truly specialize in children's grief. It could be finding.
Is that typically somebody that the pediatrician, like, that's why I said pediatrician, like, is this somebody who typically has to be the child has to be referred to, or can
They usually don't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But the pediatrician is always a great place to start, because they might know people in the community that they would recommend. So that's not a bad place to start. But Yeah, but there are a lot of places that you can go without any sort of referral.
Okay.
Grief groups can be a good place for some kids. Other kids are not going to open up in a grief
Groups.
group. Good
Yeah.
grief groups for kids will be very play based. So,
Okay.
for a lot of kids, they will be very willing to engage in the activities and with the participants there. So,
Okay.
try a whole bunch of different things out. For some kids, they will get their grief out in very physical or creative ways. So maybe they
Mhm.
want to really get into expressing their or getting their grief out really in a sport and releasing it in that capacity. So
Right.
there's definitely value in that too. They might not be sitting there talking about their grief, but they are getting these big feelings out. Maybe it's through running, maybe it's through swimming. There are lots of different ways to get this big energy out in a way that can still be very healing, even though they're maybe not talking about their grief. So
Okay.
different things will work for different people. So I would say just keep trying things and see what works, and also letting your child or teen know too that we're going to try a whole bunch of different things out. Some things might feel like they're a good fit for you right now. Some things won't.
Hmm.
And, we can keep trying different things over time, because if something doesn't work for you and feel helpful or healing right now, that doesn't mean that is forever.
Right.
Maybe it's just not something that works for you right now. And,
Okay.
even things like arts and writing and that can be a
Right.
really helpful way for kids too.
Okay. So then let's kind of flip the script. So explain why it's crucial for kids to get some help navigating the loss. So say you've got two completely different children and they've each lost a parent, and one has the other parent or a caregiver who's tuned in and getting them support, and the other child gets no support. Like
Hmm.
what does that look like long term? What is
Yeah,
the impact of not getting that support long
sure.
term look like?
Well, the grief needs to go somewhere. And if it
Yeah.
is not going out in some capacity, in whatever way works for that child, it's going to sit within, and eventually it will bubble up. It might bubble up into some physical health ailments over time. It might bubble up into just this unprocessed grief that eventually as an adult they'll start to process, and it's so much more difficult to process as you know decades later versus
Hmm.
slowly letting that out and processing it little by
Right.
little, right as it's happening.
Yeah.
I think all the time of I don't know if you ever listen to Anderson Cooper's podcast, but he talks
Yeah.
quite a bit about how he never let himself grieve as a child when
Yeah.
his dad died when he was 10. And just now, at his age, he's slowly
Starting.
letting himself feel
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And he talks quite a bit about how he feels like he missed out on things, very joyous occasions too, because he never really let himself feel
Yeah.
anything, for
Yeah.
the good and the bad. Because if
Right.
you don't open yourself up to process the tough, heavy, big, griefy things, then you're also not really letting in the joyous
Yeah.
feelings as well. So I
Yeah.
think about that quite a bit with this type of scenario.
So for you personally, as I mentioned earlier, your family experienced well, I know you experienced some miscarriages, but you also
Hmm.
experienced the birth of your daughter. She was stillborn, is that right?
Yes. Hmm.
How did living through such all of those losses, but particularly that one, how did that um, change or evolve your approach to your work, or did it? And if so, if it did, how so?
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely changed everything in an instant, from
Did it?
personal to professional. It really made me realize a couple of different things. It made me realize that there's decent support in the hospital setting for families when they go through a loss, but the moment they leave the hospital, there's a not really anything out there.
Hmm.
And if there is support out there, you're kind of blindly walking around hoping to find it. There's not really a whole lot of support
Yeah.
information given to you when you leave the hospital. So that was really eye-opening to me, walking through that as somebody who had supported hundreds of
I
families
was going to
through
say
grief situations.
you had the
Yeah.
means to navigate that, and how
Yeah.
many
So I
people
felt
don't? Yeah.
yeah, I felt very privileged leaving the hospital knowing
Yeah.
what I know, because I had the background knowledge. I had the information of how to support my own children through
Yeah.
the death of their sister. And yet I still felt like I was kind of on my own. So with that, I decided I really need to create some resources so others don't feel so alone in this process. So I started creating support groups for bereaved parents. I created a bereaved sibling support group. And with every new creation of something, I realized there was another layer of
Yeah.
gaps. So that led me to make the books that I have made to help support people through their own loss situations. But so there's that. There's like this lack of resources, but there's also, I think, what I didn't truly understand until it was me in this bereaved um, parent identity is that this doesn't just go away. I knew that, but I don't think I truly understood the depth of what the loss really feels like. This forever ache of what could
Mm.
have been, what should have been, that
How long
longing that
ago?
never goes away.
When was she born?
So we just reached her in December. It was her ninth birthday. So
Okay. So even nine,
it's almost
almost
been
a
a
decade later,
decade.
and you're
Yeah,
still, yeah,
yeah, yeah. And I think that's the piece that I didn't fully grasp. The I mean, in some ways, yes, it was 9 years ago, but in some ways, it feels like it was just yesterday. I mean,
yeah,
I can physically place myself back in that room. I feel all the same senses I felt that day 9 years ago. There are certain things that it doesn't matter how much time has passed, you can place yourself right back in
yeah,
that space and feel what it felt like then.
yeah,
And that longing never goes away.
yeah.
I, I've met many bereaved parents that are decades out, and they'll still tell you, I've led these events where we were honoring children who had died, and I would have these people in their 70s and 80s come up to me and say, "Thank you so much for being able to honor my child." Many of them who had never had the experience of honoring their child who was stillborn in a public way. I had people say,
Wow.
"That's the first time I've ever heard somebody say my child's name." And they'll share they would be 60 this year. They would
Oh
be
my
40
gosh.
something this year. And so a parent never forgets.
Yeah,
Those years are always right there on the top of their mind. They know
yeah,
exactly how old their child would be, even if it's
yeah,
been many decades.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So, what, in terms of if a child had, like, I mean, you always hear people say, well, when you've lost somebody, the worst thing you can say is, well, at least this, or,
Yeah,
what are the things, if a child has lost somebody important in their lives, what are the do's and don'ts in terms of don't say this, do say this, don't do
yeah,
this, do this? Like, what, how do you show up
sure,
for a child, for
yeah.
somebody as, like, I mean, I'm not even talking for like the family members, I'm talking for friends of the family. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, what are the
Yeah.
things you do or don't say?
So as far as the don'ts, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the at least. Anything that says at least is going to be a dismissive or minimizing type of
Right.
statement. So
Hmm.
just cut that out. I think often there's this, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so they just don't say anything. And that's a
Right.
mistake too. It's actually better to say the wrong thing
Something.
than to not show up at all. They know you
Okay.
care, or at least they can look back once they've had time to process and say, yeah, that really hurt what they said.
Yeah.
And they said something. They
Yeah.
showed that they cared, even if in the moment it didn't feel like it was something that was supportive. But
Hmm.
I something that people can always say if they don't know what to say is, I don't really know what to say right now, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I'm right by your side. I'm here to help in any way that I can. And
Hmm.
if you can share a couple ways of how you can be there for them, that's really, really helpful, because that takes away that, like, let me know if I can help, which nobody's going to reach out with anything that can help. They don't
Right.
know what can help. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so if you have some ways of, maybe you say to the child, if you would like to talk about them or share their pictures, I'd love to hear about them if that's something
Yeah.
that you would like to share with me. Or if you're not wanting to talk about anything right now, I'd love to take a walk with you. Or if, let's say, let's say you have kids that play with their kids, let's go to the park together and just
Yeah.
find some ways. How do you naturally show up for this
Yeah.
child? Find some ways that are natural ways that you always show up for them, and just be there for them. So I don't know if there's any like magical words, but some ground, I guess some framework is validate their feelings that they might have, and not assuming. I think that's what gets a lot of people in trouble, is assuming something
Mhm.
about how a child is thinking and feeling about things. So
Mhm.
you can ask them, you can say, how are things feeling today? Be very specific, because how are
Yeah.
things feeling? That's a huge weighted blanket
Overwhelming.
statement
Yeah.
that can, a lot of grievers, no matter what their age, they don't know how to answer that question, because that's a very loaded question. But,
Yeah.
or very specific things like, how'd you sleep last night?
Mm.
Have you had anything to eat yet today? Let's go
Yeah.
get something to eat. So the more specific that you can get with how you can help support them, or how you can check in on them, the better. And
Okay.
just create an opening for, I'm here. If you want to talk, if you don't want to talk, I'm right here with you.
Okay. Okay. So you've written the ABCs of Grief, which is a series, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
your most latest edition or book in the series coming out later this month, early next month, and it's on coping. Talk
Yeah.
about the different books and how they differ, and kind of what
Mm-hmm.
your approach was to tackling such complex emotions, but for an age appropriate audience.
Yeah, yeah. So there are 3 books in the series. There's the ABCs of Grief is book 1, and what that book really does is it breaks down what is grief. It's
Okay.
this giant word with so many different pieces of it, but it really takes all of these concepts of really grief theory and what we know to be true about grief, and it breaks it down into ways that kids can understand. So things like
Okay.
A is for anything. And it talks about how grief is not just death loss, it's many things that people can experience, any change or loss or transition. And it
Hmm.
really goes into the elements of defining what grief is, how it can show up, what it feels like. And I've read this book to kids of many different ages, but something that always is interesting to me is some of the older kids. They read this book, middle school, high school age kids, and they're like, wait, what? That's grief too? I didn't know that. And just giving
Wow.
a word to it, because I think so many people just think grief and death, and those are the
Yeah.
only 2 things that go together.
Yes.
So I've sat there with teens reading them this book as a conversation starter. And I
Yeah.
always preface it, I'm like, I know you're not a little kid anymore, but we're going to read this book as a conversation starter.
Right.
And so often they find these things in this book that they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I mean, there's
Yeah.
this piece in there where it's talking about how um, essentially you grieve for as long as you grieve. There's no timeline. And I've
Right.
had some kids who have said, oh, I thought like this was done in like a year, and like I'm good and I move on and I'm okay. And so it's breaking down some of these common grief myths and misconceptions that our society has as a whole too.
That one that you just said, that the fact that a child would feel like it's going to be this finite period of time, then that almost brings in like a whole new level of pressure, because it's like, if your grief is lasting beyond that, like, what's wrong with me? Am I doing this wrong?
Yeah.
Am I, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
that's
So it gives
the,
permission to
yeah,
just
yeah,
be how you are, who you
right,
are in your
right,
grief.
right.
So that's book 1. Book
Okay.
2 is the ABCs of Grief, Emotions, and Feelings. And
Okay.
it goes through, again, it follows the alphabet. So it goes through diving into 26 different emotions and feelings that can come up in grief. And there are many other feelings that can come up that are not captured in those 26, and those end up on the end pages that I have. So there's another 100 or so in there. And the ones that were chosen for those 26 were very intentionally chosen, and they can bring up these pretty deep conversations between the child and the person reading the book with them. Or I know sometimes adult support groups have been utilizing these books, and they'll take a page or two as a conversation starter to get something, get some discussion started within their groups. And it talks about some things that people are sometimes a little bit more hesitant to talk about, like R is for relieved. And it talks about how there are some grief situations where there is some relief, and we're sad that this happened, and also relieved that that person is no longer in pain. And the illustrations were very intentionally chosen as well. I did a lot of work with my illustrator to give some guidance and make some edits and adaptations to the illustrations to really capture and add a layer of depth to the written words there, to be able to have these deep conversations. And so there are definitely some, it's much deeper than just sharing the word. There's some both with the written words underneath of whatever that emotion is, and the illustration, there's a lot there to have a conversation of what is showing up for you. And I've used this with kids and teens as essentially an assessment tool to see what's showing up for you in your grief. And I've had kids go through this book with me and essentially rate how much of this that they're feeling. And sometimes I'm really surprised by what they say. Some things that I'm expecting to be like kind of in the middle or a higher number is pretty low for them, and vice versa. And it's been such a beautiful way for me to hear a little bit more about how things are showing up for them. So it can be such a beautiful tool. And then the third book in the series is the ABCs of Grief Coping, again, following through the alphabet and bringing up different ways that people can cope and move with their grief, honor their grief. And so there's something for everyone in there. Again, there's more words than fit in the alphabet for that. So I have extra words on those end pages to inspire people. And kind of like I said in the beginning, different things will work for different people. So it's nice to have essentially like a coping menu to choose from and try it on and see if it works. And I even think about myself in my own grief processing. What worked for me year one is not what is really working for me right now. It's different. And I think if we as adults can share these little insights with the kids and the teens in our family or that we're working with, we can help them realize that this is evolving. We can make our own, we can make our own adaptations and ways that we cope with this through time. So nothing is strict, you write it in the sand and that's it.
Right. Well, congrats on the latest book. I think that's amazing. And I will include links to purchasing and all of that in the show notes. I have two questions I ask everybody. And I'm curious for you, what has been the single most impactful or transformative experience you've had since you've been doing this work?
Oh, wow. That's a hard question.
I would imagine it would be, because I think you're working in a really hard space. I marvel at.
I'm not sure if there's any one situation that comes to mind, but I think what always gets me is when I have somebody reach out to me about the impact of my books. And, you write a book and you put it out into the world and you hope it's going to do some good things. And you never really know the impact that it's going to have. But some of the messages that I've had either through emails or DMs in social media have been things along the lines of, this is the only book that resonated for my child and helped
Oh,
them open up about their grief experience, or this
well, that's
is
validating. My gosh.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So those type of messages, I mean, it brings tears to my eyes thinking about those. I'm like, this is why I made this book. This is why I
Yeah.
made this series.
Yeah.
That was the hope all along, that it would help, even one child, and the hope is for many more, but having those kind of messages really validates the whole point of these books being out in the world.
That's amazing. All right. Last question. Are you afraid to die? Why or why not?
So I used to say yes for sure. And I think the more integrated I've been in this work in the grief space, I'd say I'm not afraid to die. What I would be, the piece that does give me some anxiety is those that are left behind. Like if I were to die young and I still had young children at home, I worry about them being supported and taken care of and their own coping. But for me, myself, the dying process, I'm not afraid of that at all.
Yeah.
I've been around it enough. I've seen probably too many people to count that have gone through the dying process. So I think so many people have a fear of the unknown, and that's a big
Yeah.
piece of their own death fear.
Yeah.
So that piece for me, I'm not afraid of
Yeah.
that process, but it's really who's left behind and how they're going to be coping with that.
And I think especially when it's young kids that are at home, like that, totally.
Mm-hmm.
I get
And I
that.
hear it all the time. My kids are
Yeah.
so integrated into my work that my kids, well, mostly my daughter, who is 7, she'll bring it up all the time. She's like, I really hope you don't die when I'm like, oh my gosh, like right to the heart.
Oh my gosh. Right.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
she'll mention, she knows that everybody dies one day. She's like, when you die, I'll still love you.
Aw. Well, it sounds, I mean, that's almost like healthy, like that
Yeah.
it's something that's spoken about in your home. I think that's wonderful.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, Jessica, thank you for your time and for being on the podcast. I think the work that you're doing sounds so transformative, and um, it's almost like it's going to pay itself forward for generations. You're changing things for people, and therefore, how they lead their lives and the lives of children they'll have one day. So thank
Yeah.
you, listeners. I will drop all links to Jessica's website and socials and books and all of the good stuff in the show notes so you can learn more about her work. I really appreciate your time today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
All right. Like this episode of Dying to Know More, be sure to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode.